When most people think about ancient Greece, they're thinking actually about one particular city state, Athens, and one particular time period, what we call the Hellenic era, from Hellas, the Greek word for Greece. It's the golden age of Athens. It begins with a date I want you to remember for your middle of semester opportunity to excel. The Persian War, 499 to 480 BC. The Greek city-states were being attacked by the superpower of the time, Persia, modern Iran. And they banded together and, against all odds, were able to defeat the Persians. It was kind of a David defeats Goliath kind of thing. And the result of that was twofold. First of all, it filled the Greeks, and especially the Athenians, with a sense of optimism, a confidence in themselves. Look what we did. It also brought about a period of economic prosperity. You know, often the winning side in a war, things go well for them afterwards. And that happened in Greece. So there's this great flowering of Greek culture in the Hellenic era, of literature, especially they liked drama, the theater, and philosophy, which we'll look at in our next module, but also the visual arts, sculpture, architecture in particular. Everything coming out of the Hellenic era has three characteristics. The first is humanism. The focus is on human beings, human accomplishment, human achievement. You don't get very far in understanding ancient Greek culture by studying their religion. They had it. And there was even the sense that if you don't honor the gods, they may find a way to make you pay for that. But when we were talking about the ancient Hebrews, the focus was on the religion because everything revolved around that. Even their sense of who they were. Think of the book of Deuteronomy. A wandering Aramean was my father. Yahweh did not set his love on you because you were greater in number than any nation, for you were fewer than any nation on earth. But with a mighty hand he brought you out of the iron furnace of Egypt and gave you this land flowing with milk and honey. It is Yahweh who made Israel what they are. The Greeks, much more, this is our doing. In fact, you can see humanism in Homer's Iliad, which sets the tone for everything in ancient Greece. You know, it is up to human beings to give our lives meaning and value. You don't look to the gods for that. They don't care about you. The second characteristic of everything in the Hellenic era is rationalism. What's distinctive about human beings and the aspect of human nature that they're focused on is not our emotions, our feelings. That's part of the animal part of us. We share that with horses and dogs. It's our intellect, our reason. Rationalism is the focus on human reason as opposed to our emotions, our feelings. If you look at the sculptures in the PDF on Hellenic art, the faces are all composed, calm. There is no strong emotion. There may be physical activity, but there's no intense emotion. And there's the third characteristic, which is idealism. The focus is on the ideal. People at our best, not the sometimes less than perfect reality. For example, all of the statues in the Hellenic era, the men are all young, muscular, and athletic. The women all young and beautiful. Now, you think everybody in ancient Athens was always young and good looking? Or was it most like any other community where you have people of every age? And newsflash, most of us look better in our 20s than we do in our 60s. It's at our best. The perfect, the ideal. Not the sometimes ugly reality. Okay. Now, I want to illustrate those ideas with reference to a series of three tragedies called a trilogy, written by Aeschylus, called the Oresteia. It's named after Orestes, who is the son of Agamemnon. Agamemnon, when he comes back from the Trojan War, remember it lasted 10 years, you would think his wife Clytemnestra would be happy to see him come back, but you would be wrong. She is not happy for at least three reasons. One, while he's been gone, she's been running the city, and she kind of likes that power. When he comes back, ancient Greece was very definitely a male-dominated society. She's going to go back to being just a Greek housewife walking 3 paces behind her husband in public, that kind of thing. She doesn't want that. Second reason is that while he's been gone, she has taken a lover. And while Greek men thought it was perfectly okay for them to have a side chick, it was not okay for their wives to have a side dude. Double standard, right? Gender equality was not a thing in the ancient world. But the most important reason is what happened just before he left. The wind was blowing the wrong direction. It was blowing from the east, and they were trying to sail to the east. And they could not leave harbor. You cannot sail a sailing ship directly into the wind. And so the Greek prophet Calchas, same guy you see in the Iliad, told Agamemnon that in order to get the wind to turn, he needed to appease the gods by sacrificing his daughter Iphigenia. And Agamemnon does it. And for this, Clytemnestra hates his guts. And so when he comes back, she kills him in his bath. You know, when he gets, after riding for hours, maybe days, on a dirt road in a horse-drawn chariot, he wants to take a bath, first thing, right? She murders him in the bath. And this creates a real dilemma for their son Orestes. See, there was no court system, no criminal justice system organized in those days, way back at the time of the Trojan War. It's the tribal vendetta system of justice. Essentially, if somebody is murdered, it is up to the next of kin to avenge that murder. In this case, Orestes is obligated to avenge his father's death. If he fails to do so, he dishonors and disgraces both himself and his father. On the other hand, in order to avenge his father's death, he has to kill the person who killed Dad. And in this case, that's Mom. So, you see the dilemma? anything he does goes against the morals and values of the community. If he doesn't avenge his father's death, that's bad. But if he does and kills his mother, that too is bad. It's the original damned if you do and damned if you don't scenario. Well, he does. And a group of spirits called the Furies start chasing him. They are tasked with avenging, with punishing anyone who sheds the blood of a blood relative. That's a taboo. You do not do that. Now, ironically, I think if he had not avenged his father's death, they would have chased him for that too. Orestes can't win. But they pursue him until he finally takes refuge in the temple of Athena in Athens, goddess of wisdom. And she persuades the Furies to let her judge the case. But it's a difficult case. She can see both sides. On the one hand, there is justice in the idea that he needs to avenge his father's death. And in order to understand that, you do need to understand that they considered children to belong more to the father than to the mother. And part of the reason for that was, in addition to the fact that dad was the center of the family, not mom, was that they understood the process of human reproduction in a very different way from the way that we do today. They understood it by the analogy of what happens when you plant a seed in the ground. If you plant, say, an apple seed, you get growing up a copy of the apple tree that the seed came from. The pattern for what it's going to be and the life force comes from the seed. I would point out that sperm is the Greek word for seed. Semen is the Latin word for seed. Okay, this is the way ancient people understood the process of human reproduction. The man plants his seed in the fertile ground of the woman's womb. The pattern, the life force comes from the father. The mother provides what the ground provides to a seed, and that is nutrition to allow it to grow and develop and become what that pattern inside it means to make it. They sustain that life, but the life itself comes from the father. That's the way they understood it. On the other hand, of course, in every society, it's a bad thing to kill mom. So, the case is too difficult for Athena. And so she impanels a human jury to hear the case and decide. Now, what could be a better example of humanism than this? Justice is too complex to leave in the hands of the gods. We need human beings to figure this out. Okay. Well, the jury hears the case, and it's a tie vote, and Athena cast the deciding vote. In Athens, if the jury was a tie vote, Athena cast the deciding vote like the vice president does if the Senate is deadlocked 50-50. And in a trial, Athena's vote is always for acquittal. And so, essentially, the verdict is justifiable homicide. Under normal conditions, you should not kill mom, but this is not normal conditions given that she killed dad. That duty overrides. The Furies are, of course, furious. But Athena persuades them to listen to reason and the voice of gentle persuasion. Because in the future, Athens is going to be great. And so they eventually are persuaded, and they settle down and become the Eumenides, the good spirits. Okay. The trilogy is a celebration of Athenian democracy and human reason. And there's a link. Democracy is based on the idea that human beings, if we discuss, debate freely, will in the end be persuaded by reason rather than simply following our own emotions. It's based on the idea of persuasion and reason ultimately prevailing in the free and open exchange of ideas. And it's a terribly confident view, I might add, of democracy. Which brings me to the last thing we need to talk about, and that is the nature of Athenian democracy in ancient times, because it was not like what we call democracy today. In the United States, we have what we call a representative democracy. We elect our leaders who govern on our behalf, and if we don't like what they're doing, then we have the power to vote them out of office periodically. As I'm recording this for fall semester 2020, the presidential election is coming up, and I sincerely hope that you will join me in telling Mr. Trump that he is fired. I didn't vote for him 4 years ago, and I'm sure as hell not going to vote for him now. In Athens, it was what is called direct democracy. There was no president. There was no Congress or legislature. The citizens themselves voted directly on everything. Every law was voted on by all of the citizens meeting in the assembly, which actually took place in the theater, by the way. It was the biggest public gathering place. Now, first of all, that's easier to do in a city of maybe 50,000 people. America is over 300,000 people. There is no place big enough for us all to meet. But you do need to understand this about Athenian democracy. It was much more restricted than ours. The citizenship was basically restricted to free adult males. Slaves were not considered citizens. Women and children were not considered full citizens. Okay? For that matter, women in the United States only got the right to vote 100 years ago. And in Saudi Arabia, women have only gotten the right to vote in the last few years. So the men, the free adult men, would meet and vote on everything, every government decision. So hopefully you have an idea of what humanism, rationalism, and idealism are about. I'll give you another example of well, I gave you that. What I'm going to ask you to do in the discussion will be to look for humanism, rationalism, and idealism in the reading. The reading is made up actually of two short pieces. One is Pericles' funeral speech during the Peloponnesian War. We'll talk about that war later. But it's an occasion kind of like our 4th of July and Memorial Day combined, where they honor those who died fighting for Athens. The other is actually from a Roman writer named Vitruvius, but he's reflecting on the design of Greek temples. And so I'm going to ask you to look for examples of humanism, rationalism, and idealism in that reading. See you next time.